Welcome to Unbound. You're here for conscious chats that go deeper than your Instagram feed, where we ditch the dogma but keep it real. So let's get unbound. Mercury retrograde setup. How did that go for you?
Oh, just incredible. Just incredible. I mean, I started off this morning with getting our names called over the intercom at the airport because I was I know they've started boarding, but we don't need to go now. Like, we're just standing in a queue. Like, we'll just finish my bagel. We'll make our way down. The next thing, they're like, Hannah Davison. Like,
it's very tantric to come right to the edge of things.
Exactly right.
Today we thought we might give you a little session on getting unbound on happiness. Just a small topic today.
Tiny, easy.
Just keeping it very nice and accessible.
Well, I think the thing is, it sounds so simple, right? Just be happy. Don't worry. Be happy.
Yeah.
But never was there a more ridiculous instruction. just don't.
I mean,
just don't worry. Just
the
stop
answer
there.
is there. Right? How do you access that? Is
Right.
quite a different
You can't
story.
fit that on a t-shirt. But
Well, yeah.
you can fit it in a podcast episode.
Well, we'll do our best. Yeah.
All right, let's get unbound on happiness.
You know, I think I've been talking about it a lot recently because it's something that we all want, really, is just that's what we're looking for. In every direction that we go, we're looking to just be happy. Everything we're chasing is ultimately about that. We think it's going to bring us happiness. Whether it actually does or not is another question. And I think that can be the often disappointing part about getting the things that you want or having many blessings in your life. And I see that a lot as this guilt of privilege of I've got a wonderful life, I've got children, I've got, a pretty good partnership, I live in a lovely house, whatever it might be, and still I'm not happy. So I know I struggled with that for many years because I didn't have all the things, but I knew that my life was pretty good comparatively, certainly with other parts of the world and even other parts of Aotearoa. But I wasn't able to actually feel that because the thing is that happiness, we start to discover, is an inside job. It's an inner state, and the external circumstances feed into that, but it has to be cultivated within. So as one of my teachers says, you can be eating off gold plates as the example that he liked to use. But if you can't enjoy it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the external circumstances are. And then you can have what other people might deem to be challenging or sparse or limited external circumstances and be enjoying it to a much greater degree. So in my personal journey, and we talked about my story in episode 1, and I felt like it's important to kind of come back because we touched upon depression and significant depression that I had. But then, what is the pathway out of that? And I've kind of done a masterclass on it in my own experience. I feel very passionate about bringing people out of particularly depression. I want everyone to be able to go on the journey and experience what it feels like not to be, obviously not depressed, but certainly not even melancholic, but just actually joyful and happy and enjoying life, because that's really what we're here for. And I think it's a complex process and it's not just one thing. I do talk about meditation a lot because I think as a primary starting point, it's very important to be awakening to that inner baseline of happiness. That's where true happiness really is. It isn't in the circumstances. So if we get mistaken about where we're going to find it and constantly chase the circumstances, once I get this, once the house renovation's done, once, booking endless trips, which I certainly did for a while. I did the research on that. I'm just living for the next trip and I need to have another. I hear this a lot from people. I need to have my next trip booked or else, I might just fall into a slump in between without something to look forward to. And when that kind of narrative is playing out, it means that we're not really enjoying life in between. And these peak moments, as we've been exploring, are few and far between. So we don't want to be, of course we're going to enjoy those things and that's great. That's the easy access point. But even, some people are on holiday and they're not enjoying it because their access to the inner state is limited. And so unless everything lines up, the room's right, the hotel's right, the food's right, the children are doing the right thing, the partner relationship is at a good point, then we can be happy. And so we get into this confusion around trying to control all the pieces. And that gets exhausting because, of course, we can't control all the pieces. Anyone with children knows they're just, wild cards. They're going to do and feel whatever they think in the moment based on their age. They will move your shit. It will get messy. And they're there to teach us, really, to enjoy the chaos and play of life. And when we're trying to rigidly control, that's when we're really going to struggle with that. So obviously, but this isn't the only piece. But cultivating that inner state is absolutely essential. It's also giving a contrast to the physiological state, the state that you're used to, your baseline state, whatever it is. There's something much deeper and much more blissful and much more stable available at a deeper layer of awareness, which is why these techniques have been around and promoted for so long, eternally throughout time, really, throughout history. If you were in the right place at the right time to get that knowledge, is because it's not just in the circumstance. It's not just in the relative layer of life.
I have a question.
Yes. I can see it.
I can see you fidgeting. Also, so outside of the peak experiences where there is a sense of achievement or euphoria or bliss or excitement, it's in the middle that we also want to be able to access and deeply sense that happiness. My question is, like back in episode 1, we talked about your experience of depression and anxiety. So would you have known the full experience on every level of what happiness felt like? And at what point would you have felt that? And for people who maybe can't remember what it feels like to be happy, what is the feeling of happiness? Like, what's happening? How can we describe happiness?
It is a natural bubbling up. It's a natural energy that bubbles up in the system and it kind of fills over. So the bubbling bliss that wells over into your system, and you feel it in the mind, you feel it in the body. The body starts to radiate with bliss and it feels like a wellspring that is feeding. It's bubbling up. You feel it in the heart. There's a joyfulness in the heart. There's a lightness of being, as it's often described. So when we feel depressed, it's a heaviness, right? It's always described as heavy, dark, and feeling. That's why it's also called enlightenment, which is a state really of being in joy and bliss quite a lot of the time. And that's, again, not dependent on circumstances. It's not about, I got my life to look like a particular point, like I got my cave set up the way I wanted it, and there's no drips, and I've got my beautiful deerskin to sit on and meditate. That's not what the yogis and rishis
the draft excluders
were looking for either. They were really tapping into that baseline state that bubbles up through the system. So I often hear from others on retreat after they've released a lot of stress, because of course stress is the opposite of joy, and that's why we're struggling to experience it so much in these times, because where we're at now is this normalization of stress. Like, it's normal to be stressed, it's normal to be rushing, it's normal to just feel kind of a little bit, off or fatigued or a little bit shitty, but then, you have a coffee and you pep up and you just get on with it. But the baseline state is that it's a quick frustration. It's every little thing is kind of, you're trying to overcome it mentally, trying to think your way there. Now, that pathway is very, very hard. Attitude is important. What we're thinking about does impact things. But if we're not addressing the physiology, which is driving so much of our experience, the body is the vehicle. So we start to understand this holistic experience, which is the body is determining the state of mind, it's determining the state of emotions, and they are a biofeedback system. So of course, even if you're starting to build that inner state and tapping into that baseline level of being, you're still going to need to pay attention to your thinking, but it's going to be, in my experience, a faster pathway, because I used to get really annoyed with this, like, just be positive. when you have a steaming pile of crap of stress that you've got inside, it's like trying to put, a sheet over the top and say it's all fine. It's still stinking underneath. And I think I could feel that. It felt fake. It felt forced. It felt like, and they'll say, well, fake it till you make it. And yes, there will be a level to which your thinking can adjust. But if your physiology, and we now have a deeper understanding, I think, than the early stages of daily affirmations back in the 90s, I think, was when they were sort of quite big. The body holds the score. So the body is holding on to a lot of stress. If we're not releasing that, but we're just addressing it from the thinking level, then the body isn't going to be able to support that line of thinking. And so it's going to be a constant strain where you're constantly trying to force the line of thinking, which is going against what your physiology is delivering. So if you have a lot of fear stored up inside from childhood, you got into an anxious state and it's become more of the baseline. There's more fear and anxiety. So most of the activities that you go into, you feel some layer of fear. Anxiety about social setting, anxiety about what's happening at work, anxiety if I'm not able to control everything. I'm going fine unless things start going out of my control, which I see as a very common state. Then often those people will feel like, I'm good, everything's good, but that's because they've managed to control the circumstances, which is only going to last for a period of time, maybe even less than an hour, but at a minimum a few months before some other challenge arises, because what nature is ultimately trying to do, your highest self, is to move you to a more elevated state where you're not reliant on the circumstances. That's quite bound. And like we're talking about here is getting unbound. So if there's a lot of fear in the system, your body is producing the biochemistry of fear, which comes with a lot of thinking. So we know that when we get stressed, when we get triggered, when we're anxious, the first thing that happens is the thinking goes up. The amount of thoughts and the flavor of the thinking shifts. And so there's lots and lots and lots of thinking. So then what we're trying to do is the fear is all there and we're trying to battle the thoughts, and it becomes a very frustrating, tense state where you're battling the physiology. So I always will say you can't think your way there. You need to cultivate the physiological state that will support happiness, that will start to turn your brain back into its original state, its homeostasis, where it is producing the chemicals of happiness, which are oxytocin, GABA, endorphins, anandamide. Anandamide is the bliss molecule. Oxytocin is the bonding trust molecule. Trust equals happiness. Fear is the antithesis of trust. So there is a certain biochemistry that gets produced in meditation that switches those neurotransmitters back on because of the state of consciousness, the state of rest, the experience that's produced, at least. I mainly speak to Vedic meditation as a style because I haven't practiced the other styles. So they don't tend to have mindfulness, or more concentrative practices don't tend to produce this quite to the same degree, is my understanding. But I was always told, oh, you just don't produce enough serotonin and you need to be on, and this was back when I started taking antidepressants in my early 20s, you just need to be on antidepressants because your brain doesn't produce it. But there was never any explanation of why does my brain not produce it. It's not a defect, it's a stress response. It's so much stress absorbed and then the body's habituated into that state. And of course, I ended up going off that medication, and now I'm experiencing a state most of the time of quite a lot of bliss and joy and not circumstance dependent. So it's got nothing to do with, there's bliss bubbling over inside my system and brain. I can feel it throughout my whole body. I didn't even know what bliss felt like other than when I took an E, which I also tried to get it through those mechanisms, and then had, terrible come downs, which only made my system worse because it was kind of trying to produce something that wasn't really readily, the neurotransmitters weren't really switched on, and so it's trying to force it out of there. And then of course what's left is you're at a lower state afterwards cumulatively versus when you're encouraging the system to naturally start producing it. It takes a little bit of time. It's not in your first meditation necessarily that's going to happen, but as you keep putting the system there, it starts to get with the program. It's a bit like training any other kind of muscle, training it into bliss chemistry or stay and play chemistry, which is the chemical signature of happiness, as opposed to fight or flight, which is the chemical signature of stress. So we need to work with the physiology, not just try to overlay the thinking on its own.
Yeah. So it is, well, obviously, we should say, not medical advice. If you are taking any antidepressants,
we will repeat that.
Make any changes
Yes.
under supervision of your doctor.
Yes, exactly.
However, like, it's quite inspiring that it's possible to change that scenario if that's been true for you and that's been your experience and your path has meant that ultimately you got off antidepressants and you're able to be in the state now of real bliss. So because I think sometimes, and just, anecdotally from a friend of mine just being like, this is the way my brain is. This is the way it's always going to be. I'm always going to be on antidepressants. And I was just like, that made me quite sad to feel like that was the belief and understanding. I wonder, like, in this day and age, our lives and the input and the stimulus that we're getting is so constant and so noisy and absolutely continuous. We're constantly stimulated. And if we're not, like, you find yourself reaching for your phone or, doing something. And there's just so much noise that sometimes I feel like it's hard to get a clear reading on your inner state because you don't have to. Because you can be completely disconnected if you want to and completely distracted if you want to from what's happening on the inside. So how can people get a clear reading? Like, if someone's like, I don't even know if I'm happy, like, I'm busy all the time. When you've got that constant movement and stuff, you're busy all the time. You may not even know because you could be quite disconnected from that. So what would you recommend for people who are like, how do I get a reading on this and know where to start?
Yeah, I think most people know. They know that they don't feel that good because there's always moments where nature is going to show you where your work lies and where the pathway to evolution is. And that is just going to come up. You may get away with it for a while, and then there will be that moment where you're alone at home and you feel not so good, and so you reach for something. You know those moments are there, and the reason you're avoiding being in stillness or being without any kind of input is because you know or are afraid of what will happen when you stop. And I certainly didn't want to stop. I was also in that, I was single. I'd go out all the time to avoid being at home alone. I'd do almost anything to avoid that because I knew as soon as I stopped. And we all have quiet moments that come regardless, even when we're watching something and our mind starts to wander on to all the things that we haven't address that are bubbling up there. So it's hard to avoid your own self. You are with yourself all the time. You can do a damn good job of trying. There's a myriad of ways to avoid it, but there's still going to be a sense that something is there, that I don't feel as buoyant as I have before, that I'm generally going to a more negative mindset, that my body doesn't feel so good. So I think, that's why we need to create a contrast as well. Often I find, just this week I'm teaching a group to meditate, and I ran a retreat, and one of my retreat participants said, I didn't really think I was that stressed coming in here. But now that I've de-excited a bit more, I'm really noticing the contrast. And that's what I mean by the normalization of stress as a state, is we're so used to it that we don't actually know what the higher potentiality is. And even when I started meditating, I was just stressed, exhausted, anxious, felt like I was constantly, not able to pay attention to what people were saying, feeling very scatty. And I just was like, I need to sort this out. I didn't in any way was like, I want to feel blissful. It was just a sense that there must be something better. But I had no idea what even, and I'm still discovering newer and newer levels of that. I had no concept. There was no even word that I could have used to describe, I want to feel blissful. I wasn't thinking that. But that is the state that naturally unfolds when we clear the stress. So the stress is a huge part. There's two things happening in meditation. One is the awakening to the baseline state of inner bliss. That is, people will say happiness is on the inside. And I was like, great, but where is it? It's not there.
Point to it.
And I want to stay away from my inside because it doesn't feel so good. It is there. It's just a bit deeper than what you've been experiencing. So when we're taking our awareness consistently to that deeper layer, it starts to habituate to it and have the capacity to have that state online, even in the eyes open, even in times outside of meditation. And then you're resting the body deeply, which is when it does its optimal stress release. So people that say, I'm an active relaxer, I like surfing, I like running, I like jogging, even yoga, it's not releasing stress at the optimal level, because the body really only does that when it's resting, which is why doctors will say, rest, go home and rest. They don't mean go home and just scroll on your phone and keep doing things or lie on the couch, but stay in that state. They mean like genuinely rest, but we're not able to do it because of the levels of stimulation. And then this activity in the body, the more we're moving into activity, the more we're heading towards the stress state. Fight or flight is a lot of movement. So even running, the body doesn't really know that that's any different to running from a predator, apart from there isn't that overlay of, I must get away. But it does increase cortisol, and we know that. So it does produce an element of stress response. We might feel better afterwards, but we're not releasing stress, or we just have all these really joyful, blissful, happy runners. There's so many people running, they're not getting that. So we have to see this understanding that there's something deeper to be gained from the thing we're avoiding most, which is just being with ourselves, just having some time in stillness, and particularly with this style of transcendent practice, going deeper than what stillness you're able to access when you just sit there by yourself. So that's what happens as the mantra, the mind vehicle, takes the mind inward. So that is absolutely the starting point. It's why I teach this for a job. It's why, I share this on this podcast, because I don't think there's no way I could have got there through other means of talking, thinking. It just wasn't going to happen. And it trained my body. There's a certain habituation to those states wherever you're at. The state of lethargy, the state of melancholy, the state of depression is deeply baked into your system. If you've been depressed for a while, or your body sort of naturally goes there quite easily, there's a deep groove there that it sort of slips back into. It's habituated to it, which in many cases started in childhood. And for me, I was depressed from such a young age. So of course my system was entirely comfortable there. It needed a physical recalibration into a different state. So that repetitive action, not just once a week, 15 minutes on the car mat, 5 minutes on the car mat 3 times a month, isn't going to do it. And if you genuinely want to explore and have this feeling and see how good can you feel, because that's what life is about. It's not about slogging it away, getting through it, getting to retirement, getting to the holiday, getting to the next thing. We're missing so much in between. And I think there's part of us that's grieving that and yearning for that. And we just know that there's something off there, which is why people are exploring these sort of practices now.
And they want to know how to get there. You talked about retreats, and I am a recidivist retreater, as you know.
Just a few retreats under your belt.
Retreats under the belt. I'm not finished. And I know that, for a lot of people, looking at going on a retreat might be out of reach, but it was such a point of contrast for the going in and the coming out, just having those days where you really do disconnect and you really rest and you really, you do your meditation and your rounding, and you actually get to experience that contrast, because I think without having that extended period, it would have been hard to have really understood what that contrast is, because like when you go in, even if you don't think you're stressed, you are still going in like with constant movement, overstimulated, distracted, busy, thinking of a million things, always in motion. And then I know that I've sort of had this thought and said it after more than one retreat, like, this is what it is to feel human. Like, this is what it is. And I didn't realize because everything else was going on before, but now this is a state that I can recognize because I've had the experience. And I think I also didn't realize, after some years of meditation, that experience and the sensation of the bliss bubbling up through your system for no reason.
Yes, yeah.
And you're just sitting there and it's a physical sensation sometimes too. There's no stimulus happening at all, but you are feeling this bliss. And I didn't realize that that sensation and that feeling and that experience was something that was on the table.
Even available.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't sometimes know what you want to move towards because you've never been exposed to it, or you don't know what you're missing out on because you haven't had the contrast of, okay, this is what you've normalized as your human experience. There's also the opportunity to experience this, and then go, that's a really pleasurable way to, go through my life.
And of course, if that is bubbling up, then things are going to throw you off less naturally. So if we're working from a low baseline, then it's harder to get up. If we're working from a higher baseline, it's harder to get low because that buoyancy is there. I remember, and I haven't thought about this for a while, it's been so long, but I remember the first time that happened, and I was walking around Bondi. I think I'd been meditating for maybe a couple of weeks. And I was like, why do I feel so good? And this is really interesting, right? I remember that because I didn't feel good. That wasn't normal. So I would be confused.
Yeah.
Why is this here? When's it going to leave? What have I done? How can I recreate this? Because if I felt good at some point, this is what the system does. Oh, I had a coffee. So what I'll do is I'll keep having coffees because that kind of lifts the energy falsely and then, of course, brings it back down. But you're trying to, it's such an elusive state, you almost want to restructure it. And I was like, I haven't got a text from some guy I like, which would be, your little dopamine hit at the time was probably where I was getting something from like that from. I haven't booked a holiday. I haven't done anything. I'm just walking down the road. Nothing's happening. And I just feel good. And
why?
I know it was so powerful that started, I think, my whole process of becoming a teacher of this because like there's nothing better than that. And I'm really privileged to play this role where my life can stand as a bit of a storyline for people to see someone who was very, very depressed, like not even just mildly unhappy or just busy or where your standard level of discontent is. I was extreme and I've come to the other end, and I think that's an interesting thing as well, the way nature will squeeze you down so hard in order for you to be so driven. Because I just really got to that point where I was like, I just want to feel better so badly. I'm willing to do anything. And that puts the drive in you to go all the way. So I think it was relevant for me, but also relevant for people that come into contact to hear that story and think, yes, like you said, even though I'm in a really bad place, there is hope for everyone. If I can come that far, then absolutely everyone can if they really want to do it and they're willing to do some things and challenge some assumptions and do the self-work. So that meditation piece, that's why I stress that as a very important part of it, because I don't think I could have. It creates space and room for you to do the other things, which then are also important. So these are the other factors that contribute to your happiness. So say you're meditating now, you're feeling quite good, and then you watch horror movies all day and you stay up till, midnight, 1 a.m. watching horror movies, and you sleep till 9 and you go to work and then you start that cycle again. Meditation will not be enough to offset that kind of lifestyle. So it's important to understand that once we have that baseline where we can see the contrast and we can see, oh, this is what it feels to like to feel good, we can start to really tune into where am I shifting off that and what is it that's causing me to contract again and to reproduce the chemistry of stress. So we're going to have a more clear window into what our triggers are, the emotional and psychological piece, which is important. And so you may then want to do therapy. You may want to be correcting the intellect, correcting your thinking, but you've now got the physiology that's going to support that as opposed to it being battling it out on that level alone. And I've got a number of students or people who've learned to meditate that are psychologists, psychiatrists, and they just wish that I've heard it so many times, I wish all of my clients were doing this because they're kind of battling against their physiology and the habituation. There's no space in that system. It's so clogged with stress that you can't almost putting the tools into practice. The tools are great, but we need always a bit of space between us and the action in order to perceive, in order to make a different choice, in order to be aware of what it is that we might need to change. And even to this day, I'm still becoming more and more aware of myself. Oh, I'm doing this. These sort of new levels of awareness dawn for you where you realize, oh, that's me. I'm doing that. I'm the cause of that. And it's actually this. And it's not to say I may have worked through so many other things, but there's always a new pathway of unfolding, which is always creating greater joy because your relationships will improve. The way others receive you, the way you're received, that how you approach things is going to ultimately produce a better outcome with more awareness. So that is very supportive for the other pieces. So there's still going to be an intellectual or psychological piece that what happens in the system is there is the mind, which we call in the Vedic terminology for the system, the manas, which is the mind and emotions. It's a screen that gets imprinted on, essentially. Then we have the buddhi, the intellect, which is a separate function. And then we have the prana, the breath, the life force. Then we have the physiological body. So, and the bliss is bubbling up from deeper than that, another layer within our system, this understanding of these different aspects of the system, which all feed into each other. So if we start with the negative thinking, that can cascade through into the minds and emotions. So then our emotions start to go down or start to feel more flat or more negative. And it's producing the biochemistry. The prana becomes weak. The life force in the air that surrounds us, this pranic field that we have, starts to dull and become very weak and lethargic and stagnant. And then the physiology starts to follow. So there's this cascade and it can go from one direction to the other. So say we have positive thinking and we've addressed a lot of our thoughts and we're actually tapped into that inner whirlpool of bliss and inner contentment, and then we just sit around all day, we don't move the body, you'll end up feeling stagnant, which will cascade into the thinking because now we're going from the body level up the other way. So it's not that we can't just sit around all day, we can't not move the body, we can't not energize the pranic field, the life force, which is where breath work comes in. It's very useful for that. Even moving around outside obviously clears the prana, that fresh air. That's the most basic form of that. If you don't have access to other tools, people will say to you, just go for this is Victorian brisk walk around the room or a walk around the property or, get outside and shift the body because that shifts the physical state, which then cascades through. But maybe not enough because I often hear from people, I'm walking, I'm exercising, but I'm still depressed. So in and of itself, by itself, it's not going to do it alone, but it's supportive and it's an important part of the process. So it's understanding these different layers. I think starting with a baseline practice immediately brings a huge amount of support, and then the other pieces can start to really feed into the picture. So there's this understanding the environment that you're in, what you're taking in as well, the impressions. So what we're watching, the content that we're consuming. I think I shared before I learned to meditate, I was listening to Serial, the crime podcast. And
which was great.
It was great. But my mind was we listen to or want to watch things that match our inner state. So when there is a lot of drama and stress, we want that dramatic content because that is what matches our state and it continues and perpetuates that state. So after that course, I was like, I don't really want to listen to this anymore. I'm like, kind of just got to finish it so I can be done. And I haven't listened to any true crime since then because it just doesn't feel enlivening, and I can feel like an anxiety that comes on because there's a lot of content that we watch that's designed to trigger a fear response. That's the outcome that the producers are looking for. The news does that. A lot of people stop watching the news because there's this sense, particularly some of the more, sensationalized news programs. I had a friend that worked in the news in early 2000s, and he has never watched the news since he's seen behind the scenes of how it's made. So we have to be a little bit more conscious, I think, about what we're consuming. Of course, that comes into every aspect of what we're taking in. And it's not to become boring. We can never watch, exciting TV shows, or we only have to eat healthy all the time, or whatever that is for you. It's just the awareness of, if you're wanting to cultivate a state where you feel the best, it is about what you're taking in. It is about what you're cultivating on the inside. It is all the pieces. But once you get going, it's actually not that hard. When you have the right building blocks, it's not that hard to get into a consistent state where you feel good, and then you may have a bit more bandwidth. You watch the Menendez brothers, as I did, and I was like, I'm having flashbacks to this in my meditation. Obviously, there's been an impression made on that very absorptive manas, mind, on the inside, the screen, it just imprints there. And so if you find that you're thinking about shows afterwards, or they're coming up in your meditation or your dreams, it usually means that an impression has been made. And some are more perceptive or aware about the degree that is happening, and some are less. So that impact is going to happen anyway. It's just whether you're aware of it. If you're really stressed and negative, in mostly a negative state of feeling, in a funk, let's say, you may have so many things that are impacting you that have built up over time, you can't be aware what it is. It's like you've got a bath full of rocks. There's so many rocks in there. What rock is doing what? Who knows? But as you start to clear the bulk of the rocks out, you can see what 7 rocks are lying in the bottom of the bathtub, and you're like, oh, that rock, I don't need that anymore. And you can start to get really clear. So we have to start with the cleaning up process first, which is why I think meditation's useful for that. Then we need to still be tuning to the environment. So those pieces can't be ignored either. If you're loving this knowledge and would like to tap in deeper, you'll love my on-demand advanced knowledge series, Self-Mastery. It's a combination of embodied techniques and knowledge to support you in unlocking deeper abundance, energetic intelligence, staying power, understanding how to clear your energetic system, and more. Take them in your own time, enjoy powerful breath, kriya, and mantra experiences, and take home bite-sized practices and the wisdom to unlock your next level of potential. Find out more at my website, gvmeditation.com, under Self-Mastery.
I think, I really identify with that as well. That really resonates with what you talk about, because I could always tell when I wasn't in a good place when I'd start to listen to true crime again, and then and then I'm like, what's this feeding into? Why? And then also you sort of become more aware of how you feel afterwards, like how you feel after you've been mooching on your phone and scrolling for an hour, like what that feels like in your body, or how you feel when you've seen something quite distressing on TV, or you've listened to something quite shocking, or you've happened upon something on Instagram that, you become a lot more aware of that. I think that, I have as well, been at times in our life when the best you can do is survive and just be in that state of survival.
Totally.
And where there's, a lot of anxiety, depression, stress, and it's such a constriction on everything that you feel like you couldn't possibly find any space to do anything that's going to help. Like, one, maybe there's not the energy or the mental space or whatever. So that idea of creating space and allowing that space to expand a bit so that you have the bandwidth to do something really is the crucial first step, because it's exhausting.
Yeah, and it's because the physiological state is one of stagnancy, of exhaustion, of lethargy, of what we call tamas, heavy inertia. So if you're in that state and you're like, the reality of it is quite often, and I've been there for so long that I know the state so intimately, and it runs in my family as well, you don't really want to do as well. There's sort of this part of you that comes on and gets very grippy around it. It can be quite hard to work with this part that just doesn't want to do anything. And it doesn't want to do. There are so many things that you could do that would be supportive, and you may even be a meditator who stops meditating. This happens as well when you get into the state and you're like, I don't want to do meditation, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. So it's really good to have the understanding that like attracts like. So why you don't want to do it is because your system is in the state of looking for things that match its current state. So things that serve you, things that are energizing, enlivening, that are going to boost your mood, they're not a match for you right now. And so you're going to feel like you don't want to do it. And it feels kind of this grippy, like, I don't want to do it. It's sort of a stubborn part that's holding on to that state. And it has to do with a sense of comfort around it. It has to do with a sense of habituation. You may not feel comfortable, but part of you is used to that state. It's more comfortable there.
And I guess it's predictable. Like our brain
it's the
loves
known.
Predictability, right?
It's the known.
It's just like, well, we'll just keep repeating.
Yeah, it's the known, and then it is also a sense of deserving, because where we get to is there will be some emotional triggers there that have got activated and then left unchecked, build upon themselves. So that state gets very baked in, and that part of you feels undeserving or like it's not possible for you, which is also a state of deserving, because when you feel you deserve it, then you naturally think it's possible. When you feel you don't deserve to feel better or to genuinely be without this stress, without this experience, you then will also feel like it's not possible. And those are the kinds of thoughts that go around. So I'm always going to be like this. There's something wrong with me. I'm just a fuck up. I'm a flop, whatever it might be. So what I would say to anyone who's experiencing that is to recognize this is a state. This isn't who you are. This is a state that your system has got into for a myriad of reasons, trauma being one, and probably a number of other things that have sort of cascaded through. A very important thing to understand is like attracts like, and opposite brings balance. So you're going to need to strive and push yourself out. No one can do it for you. The loving controllers, the family members that are around you, those of you that have family members, you can't do it for someone. They have to generate the drive inside themselves. And sometimes that comes from things getting so bad as it had for me, which becomes the driver, the impetus to start actually igniting change. But I always say to people that I'm mentoring or working with, you're going to have to reach for something that is the opposite of your state, which might just start with physical movement to begin with, that you make a commitment that no matter how you feel, no matter whether you want to or not, we don't want to look at what I want to do, because what I want to do will be matching that state. Will be, I just want to watch TV. I want to game all day. I don't want to see anyone. I want to isolate. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay in my track pants all day. Of course, right? So whenever that starts for me, I start to check in with, why am I feeling like this? It's usually like I'm tired. I'm like, okay, well, what I need is rest then. Because I'm very aware of when my thinking goes in that direction, because it means something's out of balance, and I don't want to let it get baked in. I don't want it to let it get too far. So I'm immediately moving into the myriad of tools that one has, which everyone can reach for, the very simple things, which are getting up early. Sleeping in creates more heaviness. So there is a window between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. where there's more lightness to it. So when we're getting up between 6 and 10, it is earth element dominant. So it's more of the kapha from an Ayurvedic perspective.
You want to aim for 5:59?
5:59. And, within kind of maybe a little bit later in winter, but you'll know for yourself. I know that sometimes if I go to bed later, so I go to bed 11 or 12 and sleep till 8 or whatever it might be, I feel heavy. I don't feel energized and creative and dynamic. So the time of day and the amount of sleep is one of those things that comes up in these states where you want to sleep more, because the heaviness matches sleep, and it's an escape as well. I've been there where all I want to do is sleep, and then I don't have to face life. So we're going to need to address the physiological state, get it moving, get up early. So sometimes there's a state of forcing yourself in the beginning, and it can be disappointing because you want it, but I'm just telling you, you're not going to want it. You're not going to feel better and then do it. You're going to do it and then gradually and not immediately. So you might do this for a week or two, and still the mind will be, because it's in a negative state, so it's going to see everything negative still at this point. Oh, it's not doing anything. Why am I wasting my time getting up? I'm still not happy because I'm even getting up early now. That thinking will be there, but we've got to build a cascade of building blocks to support this. So it's going to look like setting up a certain structure that supports the physiology to shift, as well as bringing in the other pieces, which might be you will probably need some therapy to identify what the trigger is, the emotional, psychological trigger that has got you. It could be something happened and you didn't realize that you got stuck in that trigger and you're in like a holding pattern, and that part of you's become active now, the part of you that feels deep shame, that feels deeply unwanted, that feels deeply rejected. It could have been one small thing, but because it's such a deep wound, it's like you press the big red button on it, and now your whole status got locked there. And what you've done is tried to push forward, ignoring that, because that's been the way that you've dealt with things till this point. And now your whole system's colored by that, and everything is starting to reflect that. Everything's looking negative. You don't want to try. You can't be bothered. Life is just not worth it for you. And so it cascades down. So that will be an important piece, but not in absence of, we might need to generate a little bit of energy in the body to even go down the pathway of reaching out. So we could start by setting up a structure of getting up early, seeing the early light. There is a reason why the ancient wisdom traditions emphasize early connection with sun, because the sun is light. There is only light there. The source of light, the source of dynamism, the great friend of enlightenment, Surya, as the sun is called in the Sanskrit. Almost every culture, indigenous culture, had a practice of connecting with the sun, or sun salutations, or sun worship, as it might have been called. But really it's enlivening, when we understand the deeper mechanics, what those practices do, enlivens the solar aspects within us, which is connected to our digestion, which is connected to our dynamism, our drive, our light. So the Surya Namaskar, the sun salutation, for example, which anyone can Google on the internet and get a 2-minute sequence that you can do, it puts the body, it energizes the prana, so it moves the life force through the body. It switches on and activates the energy centers, the chakras. And there's a lot of curving the spine back, a number of curves that come up and down, which is opening the heart. Because when we get depressed or low or flat, we start to get into that C curve and our posture drops down, and we're trying to protect the heart, and we've been hurt somewhere. So the wound is there, and now we're trying to protect that. But what we're doing is, like attracts like, perpetuating the state of low energization within the heart center. And so that obviously, that is a big energy source for us, and a big source of how we feel in terms of the internal energetic structure. So if we're not energizing that, so a lot of the Kriya, the movements that we use with breath that I teach are designed to open that heart and energize the spine, to have the spine have more fluidity and flexibility, because there's a natural flow of energy that moves up the spinal column and the heart center. So the Surya Namaskar, there's bend backwards, energizing, awakening the digestive system. It's really designed to get the body into its optimal functioning. So there's this understanding within the Vedic system that you can't be depressed if you're in those positions of the open back. And I tested that when I was in a pretty low place, and I was like, you still can. But it's supportive to get the energy moving. So even if you're meditating but you're sitting around all day and you're not energizing and moving the body and getting the prana lively, the life force lively in the system, then you can still, if your body's habituated there, sink back and stay in that state. So it's important to understand that that might be the gateway, getting the body moving first, addressing the physiology, addressing the lifestyle. What parts of your lifestyle are currently not supporting you to feel better? So the question that I often recommend people ask is not, what do I want to do? Because what I want to do is usually coming from the activated small self, the trauma exposed part of you that just wants to, act from its 2, 5, 7-year-old self, which will be stay home, watch things, eat a lot, not see anyone, whatever it might be, drink a whole bottle of wine.
Which is a 7-year-old was.
Yeah, maybe not, but that's the adult version.
Yeah, exactly. Give me a cookie.
Exactly. Or free access to the cookie jar, and I don't have to brush my teeth and whatever. So we do our adult version of that, which is lie around, not shower, and, if we're really getting to that stage. And that's not to say a day of this here and there that, sometimes we need those days. That's fine. But if it's getting regular and your mood is starting to be more consistent in that level, then we might need to address that. But a more powerful question is, what would serve me in this moment? And you just ask yourself that, because what would serve you is not, the answer is not going to be a bottle of wine. It's not going to be lying around. It's not going to be staying in that funky state. It's going to be doing something different. So that's a really good one to get into the practice of checking in with yourself if we need to address something on the level of lifestyle. So we can't just meditate and then have a lifestyle that's not supportive, the content that we're taking in that has an impact, the movement, what we're doing in the body. And you'll start to notice and be more aware of when that shift takes place. And then you can pop back out of it very quickly because you're starting to tune, why am I sort of starting to have these negative thoughts? This thing happened yesterday. I didn't sort of tend to that emotional wound and give myself some emotional sustenance to heal from that. And then something else happened, and then I stayed up late, and now I'm tired, and there's a cascade from this whole system that we're talking about. the mind and emotions, the prana level, because now I'm tired, so I'm not moving around. I'm sitting on the couch. Now I'm taking in more content. I'm fatigued. And in all the source of all of this was one trigger that happened. Maybe someone rejected you, or you didn't get the job that you wanted, or you've been applying for things all week and nothing's come through, and you're starting to feel a bit triggered about that somewhere. It's activating old internal triggers in the stress bank. So when we really cast a lot of conscious attention over all these aspects, we can start to understand what are the levers. I need to pull this lever today, that one's out of balance, or it's this one, or it's all of them, that can help to shift my mood.
And sometimes it's so often like how you start your day.
Yeah.
Because I see that in myself. When I've got a schedule and I have got to get kids out the door on the way to school or whatever, and my day will start at 6 a.m. and, I'll wake up and I'll meditate, and then we have to get going, and then we have to get to school on time. And then I've sort of created that action and that activity to generate momentum for the day, and I'm off and going. If I don't have the kids and I'm left to my own devices, and then maybe I've stayed up late and my day starts off slowly, then I haven't kicked into that state of kind of momentum, and then all the schedule gets a bit squishy, and then I'm like, oh, well, that blew out, so I'm not going to, and it's just this, it is that cascade. What you're saying reminded me of that saying, mood follows action. And it's just, I've remembered that because it's just such a simple way of reminding yourself that, how you feel is determined by the choices that you've made and what you did. And last night I had, an experience that probably a lot of people can be familiar with. I had a really, really, really long day in the office, and I was exhausted, but just like, obviously not physically, but just mentally shattered. The last thing, but I hadn't really moved all day. The last thing I felt like doing was going to the gym. And so, but I was like, I know I'm going to feel good. Just, I need to move my body, and I know that's going to make me feel better. And so I got my gym gear on and I got to the gym, and then I did that thing that you do where you like sit in the car for quite a long time and you just catch up on a few messages. And then
just avoiding.
You just avoid entering the gym. And I'm like, I'm right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get in there. And, 4 minutes into my workout, suddenly I was like, oh my God, this feels so good. Like this is a different kind of energy that I'm using and that I'm generating now. And then, I ended up doing like 50 minutes of like quite hard work, and I felt great afterwards. And that's just like, I think so many people can identify with that and understand that experience of like sometimes the hardest thing is putting on your shoes.
Yes. And I think the gym's quite an extreme example, because that feels like I'm really tired and I've got to generate so much energy for a workout. But it does match up with this like attracts like, and this is why when you start one thing, so you start going to the gym, suddenly your meditations get regular and you are eating well, and one thing cascades after the other. Or you start meditating and then suddenly you feel like eating healthier. You also have the energy to get back into your workout. It all cascades in that direction, and you have more experiences of, we have to take ourselves through that experience of, I didn't want to do it, I thought I was too tired, my mind was saying all these kind of things, and then I went, and then this, and the mind gets educated in that process, and we start to create a new neural pathway where when I don't feel like this, but then I do it, it then feels like that. Whereas if we stay in the waiting room and we don't do it and we just buy into all the thinking is coming from the state. The state is, I'm tired, and so you're like, this kind of, even the voice in your own head starts to sound different. Fuck this, fuck that. It's all just, I don't want to go, and then we're scrolling and we're in that procrastination. So we don't want to be listening to the thinking then. The spontaneous thoughts will often be coming from that state at that moment. So that's why we don't see what do I want to do in this state, is what do I know will serve me in this moment. Now, you know that through regular experience. So what would serve me now? The answer is going to the gym will serve me. But it could be something as just simple as you don't have time for a full workout because you've got back from work all day. And so you just go for a 5-minute walk around the block, or you do 5 minutes of the breath or kriya, the enlivening set that you have. That's just 5 minutes. 5 minutes is actually enough to tune your state with the right tools, particularly like breath work, kriya, those kind of things, even a yoga set that depending on what you're wanting, because this is why the Vedic technologies are so powerful, is because they really address this cascade of prana, life force through the system, which shifts the thinking immediately. It shifts the minds and emotions and then the physiology, or the physiology then shifts the prana, and it goes back and forth through the system like that flow through the different layers. So those, even a mantra, a japa mantra, where you're repeating a mantra for, just 11 repetitions or 21 repetitions, or, 5 minutes of doing a japa. You're not doing your whole meditation because you've done that earlier, you're going to do it later, or you don't have time for the whole thing, but you can do a little micro tune up in the moment, or 5 minutes of pranayama, 5 minutes of breath work can shift the whole state as well. So knowing that those bite-sized tools are there as well when you can't get to something longer, but when you do that, instead of leaning into what you want to do, which is nothing, just get the dinner on, sit down, it feels seductive, like slipping into an old slipper. And so it's so like, oh yeah, it has that sort of almost, naughty seduction flavor. So it's quite attractive, like it's pulling you, because it's like, and then I won't have to do anything. But it doesn't have the enlivening, aware quality to it, which is like, yes, that's but then I also feel a little part of me will be a little bit disappointed, and my state is now deepening. It's staying in the same direction. It's going deeper down.
It's kind of that self-destructive thing.
Yeah.
I think when I was younger, I dabbled with smoking a bit, and there was something about it that was like, oh, I'm being naughty.
Yeah.
But understanding that it was self-destructive, but almost doing that as an act of violence against myself. There was some level of that there.
Because it's a match for that negating part of you, the part that wants to hurt you on the inside, even though you may not think about it that way. And I smoked for years as well, so totally get it. But it's a match for that. So it matches that, and that energy of negation is dark. It's not light. It's not happy. It's dark. It comes from sadness, shame, guilt, and it's wanting to kind of build on that. So that's why it has that sort of almost like Gollum-like little, my precious, let me have the cigarette, so that is why the AA system, one of the key parts of it, the brilliant system for working with addiction, for example, is that you need to have a connection with some higher source, whether it be God, nature, universe, whatever it might be, because the parts that are active when you're really attached to something, when addiction is online, are the parts that have that low deserving flavor. And so it's almost hard to feel like you deserve something different. So you can slip back into that quite easily. And then you've got a substance that has a physiological addicting quality to it anyway. So you're working with both that energy within yourself and then the substance itself. And so the only part of you that's going to be part of your connection, part of your consciousness that's going to be lighter and more hopeful and worthy of something other than that is going to have to be a higher part. And that's what the function meditation fulfills as well, is that it's the higher part of you that you're accessing. So you naturally start to, your desires, your thinking, your awareness starts to align with that higher part that wants the best for you, and less with these small isolated stress pieces. And, one other tool that I'll share, finally, before we close on this, we could talk a lot more, but is
happiness part 2, tune back in.
Yeah, this sense of see the job, do the job, which is this saying that we have in this tradition, which supports you to move towards things that you see means perceive or be aware of. So if we use your gym example, see the job is be aware that this gym session or your meditation or your breath work or 5 minutes of shifting your energy in some direction is the job that will serve you in that moment. So you've asked your question, what will serve me in this moment? Or there's something in the background like it would be really probably good for me if I did this, but much stronger pull, no, I don't want to do that. Moving from, as we move through the day, and this can help with procrastination as well, when we see something that's necessary, that's going to support us, that's going to serve us, we perceive it, we become aware of it. See means that. If we just simply move towards it and minimize the chatter, because there's going to be quite a lot of chatter when you're stuck in these states around doing things, doing almost anything. When you're depressed, doing anything is a big effort because there's so much stagnation there. We see it and we start practicing if you take one thing away from today, start practicing, see the job, do the job. Look around now. If you've got into some state of stagnation, there'll be things everywhere that need doing. There will be, you haven't done the dishes, you haven't had a shower, you haven't cleaned up, you haven't sent the email. There'll be so many things that you've got stagnant about. So see the job, one job, do that. That produces a momentum. We see another, perceive, do. And yes, the mind will be there, but we don't go to the mind first and allow the thinking to dominate, because that's going to obviously have a flavor based on the state that you're in that will trigger more procrastination. You get a sense of, I've done that, and then I do one more. It's never do one task and then do nothing. It always ends up building, like attracts like. So this is a really good way. It's very good for people that suffer from depression or even stagnation or getting stuck or feeling like they're procrastinating, to just see the job, do the job, see the job, do the job, and move in that direction, starting to practice with that on a daily basis, and recognizing that, I'm thinking about the job, I'm not doing it. I'm scrolling, I'm not doing it. Just get up when you notice that, just get up and do it. And it leads to this incredible buildup of momentum. And of course, momentum has a forward-moving, uplifting energy. And when we get into that, we tend to start to be more actively engaged. We feel more confident about ourselves, because when we stay in those cycles of stagnation, we start to feel like we don't trust ourselves to follow through. So when we create a different narrative by seeing the job, do the job, see the job, do the job, we end up actually creating a different narrative. I've done all the things today, I did quite a lot today, and I feel a little bit of lift, even though my physiology is still not completely resolved. There's a building of momentum in that direction.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And like for me, and for people who have ADHD, you and I just think it's a worth mentioning, is that sometimes there's a task that becomes an obstacle, and it's like one task, then another task, and it starts building a dam of these obstacles that feel like they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, that you can't get over, but they give you the mental clutter and they generate the stagnation, and then that just invites more stagnation, more build-up of that dam. And recently, I finally got into my garage and listed a few things on Marketplace that I've started selling. And just that, and I didn't do that on my own. I had support from someone else who was there with me helping. And that is often really important. That has created this cascade of movement and momentum, and suddenly, like, the water, now that it can flow, is removing the parts that are also blocking that dam, that buildup of that dam. And it can be so difficult to start that one thing.
The interesting thing is, it's not the starting, it's the not starting it that actually causes the buildup.
Oh yeah, exactly.
The starting of it, actually, once you start, the momentum, it's sometimes the generating of the momentum. So it's like trying to get the lawnmower started. You've got to kickstart it a few times, get that motor, and then it just goes. But the starting, the igniting. So what see the job, do the job does is that you aren't spending time thinking about the starting, thinking about, you're now in the momentum already. And if you pick something bigger, you can go either way. You can start small and build up, and you'll naturally have more momentum build up for a bigger task. So that can be helpful if you're really stuck. Or if you ask yourself in the start of the day, what is the one thing I could do today that would shift the dial, and start with a bigger thing. All the other things just cascade after that, because you feel such a sense of achievement, and this build up that you're talking about, the dam there of sitting in the waiting room, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So like attracts like here too, which is more stress and thinking about how hard it's going to be. And every time you do something, it's easier than you thought. It takes sometimes less time than you thought. You thought it was going to be this massive thing. It's built up over exaggerated in your mind of how big of a massive task it is, and you start it, you're like, why didn't I start this days, weeks, months, years ago? And you just need to get into that starting motion. So that's where the see the job. And when you're practiced enough, you can move on to like bigger things without all the preamble. The preamble wastes a lot of time, and we lose the dynamism and momentum of life as well. So,
and if you need to phone a friend as part of the see the job, do the job, don't be afraid to do that, because that can feel like, for some people, a bit embarrassing, to be like, hey, I actually just need you to be with me while I do this thing.
Well, part of see the job is perceive what it's going to take to get that job done. And if you're someone who starts something better with someone else around, it might be as part of that perception, I'm going to and book them in so that the time is set. And then when they arrive, you will have to start the job because now they're here.
And that's what they're there for.
And I did that for a friend who was moving house. And it's so much easier to move someone else's house than your own. Your own, it grows into this massive thing in your head. There's so many things to do. And I had moved, recently. So I went in and I came in with these giant matchas.
You went in hot.
And I was like, right. And I just ripped in so hard because I was like ready to go. And I had the intention to have shifted her quite a long way on that day. And she was like, after that, we just went like gangbusters because she could see progress happening as well. So partly even seeing the job do the job, you start and you realize, oh, things are happening. And then you feel more inspired to continue, even with little things like that. So
there's so many little nuggets there.
There are a few things,
nice,
I think.
Practical little nuggets of, also there's that saying of like something is better than nothing. And, you're talking about a little 5-minute yoga or Kriya set or just, I call it snacking, snacking on, I'm just going to have a little meditation snack or something. And then that it leads on to something else.
And one other thing I love is I do like a 15-minute, sometimes 15-minute, 21-minute Pilates class online. So when I'm traveling, I move around a lot. So you can easily get out of routine with your exercise. And I'm offering a lot of things to people. So I'm in person and then it gets to the end of the day and I haven't had time to get out. And so I use Melissa Wood's health app and I also use Pulse Byron Bay now, which I also love. And there's lots of short, particularly the Melissa Wood one has a lot of really short workouts, but I did it every day. So I made this deal with myself that I was going to do it no matter what. You can fit 11 minutes or 15 minutes. I'd put the dinner on there'd be not enough time for anything else almost. You think there's not enough time for a walk because you think a 15-minute walk isn't really going to do much. There's not enough time for a class. You can't get to classes. If you're traveling a lot, moving around, if you just do a short amount and instantly, of course it boosts energy. And then I saw my body changing because I was doing it every day. I saw that, signs of a little bit more muscle build and things like that. And it's this idea that we need to be all or nothing as well as a huge barrier to shifting the state just quite rapidly with short amount. In 5 minutes of something is enough. 5 minutes of the right technique will shift the state quickly. So don't be afraid to just do a little something. Even if it's you just go around outside and play ball with the dog or you take the kids out for 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be this hour walk or a whole lot of time at the park. Play with them for 5 minutes, and that could be enough for a shift.
Awesome.
Well, all the best out there with shifting the state. And also we'd love to hear from you if you've got follow-ups or you want to know more about anything or us to go deeper on something. Reach out to us and let us know because we're obviously going to keep diving into these topics.
On everything.
Yeah, on absolutely everything. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Georgia.
Thanks for getting unbound with us today. We'd so appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave us a review and to share this episode with anyone who you think could benefit. It helps us to keep these conscious conversations flowing. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. See you next week.